Tim, it's good to see you after the disappointing for some of us, not for others, outcome of the game on Saturday. I'm happy that you decided to show up and you brought some friends. Hey, girls.
I did bring some friends, and they got lots to talk about, but none of it is hockey. And listen, it's good to be here after Saturday, but I guess I'm going to say to you what I said to you earlier is, you guys beat us for the first time in 15 years. Congrats.
When's the last time a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup?
Oh, you had to go there, hey?
Well, hey, it was just a simple question. I mean, that's what I talked about a little bit earlier, how simple questions
Yeah, I mean,
can create a response.
depends on how you look at it. Do you mean Canadian by their geography as to where they play, or do you mean Canadian by the makeup of their team? Because
so that's how it counts. So when a Canadian team finally wins the Stanley Cup at some point in the future, that's going to be not as important because Canadians have been carrying the Stanley Cup and they get to bring it up there every once in a while. They get to travel with it. So you get to see it. You get to host it for a little bit. You just don't get to hoist it as a team.
Well, and not to mention, I cheer for a team where two of our best players are Americans. So, I guess I should be careful with what I say.
I know it's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to see them rally in this kind of an event. And I mean, unfortunately, he hasn't been able to do it in the playoffs. But hey, here we are. And he looked really good on Saturday night, and the team looked really good in front of him. And it was a good, fun game. And we'll see what you guys do tonight. We'll push this live, I think, today, but we'll see what you guys do tonight against Finland if you actually make it into the final game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, when we were texting the other day, I was talking about like it was a done deal, but I would not look at it that way. So, I mean, I can joke around, but Finland has surprised some people in certain situations, and we'll see what happens. But hey, when you guys win all the gold medals that we've won everywhere else, and then we can talk, I guess.
It's going to be awesome. Depending on how that game goes tonight, you might actually be cheering for the U.S. team tonight.
That's true. That's actually a good point. That's a good point. Anyway, yeah, we'll see how it goes. All
right. So let's talk about leadership in the context of fractional leaders who get an opportunity to play fractionally for their country, leave their team for a period of time, and actually make what I think has been or is significantly better than what we've seen in an all-star weekend for a period of time. And that's ultimately what this series, this Four Nations event. And if you're not watching hockey, I know that this weekend, that game on Saturday night turned a number of people, including some people that Tim and I know, into hockey fans. And it was fascinating to watch. And you saw leadership come together, a leadership response by dropping the gloves a couple of times in the first 9 seconds of game after being inspired both by some text messages earlier in the day and then of the reaction that happens in an arena. So it's kind of cool that your sports translates to life, and life is directly related to business. So let's talk about, we're going to talk about fractional leadership.
Let's do it.
What's on your mind? What's on your mind related to fractional leadership?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, and it's a great discussion to have because fractional leadership is a growing thing, right? I mean, it's something, let's be real, it's something that people have used probably for a long time without calling it fractional, right? Anytime, sometimes you bring a consultant on in some way, it's a fractional engagement or it's a limited engagement. And it could be what you might now use the term fractional for. But, I've been doing, since we started talking about it, Mike, I've been doing a lot of digging, a lot of thinking about, what are areas that people might think of having a fractional leader come into their organization or might find benefit, right, from having a fractional leader come to the organization. And it's challenged me a lot, actually, to be honest, because there's a lot of areas that I might not have previously thought of, or I've seen, or I've been doing my research, I've seen, and I've been hearing people getting more involved in fractional leadership in areas that I might not have previously thought of or considered. Now, from my business perspective, we are an HR and recruiting consultancy, and we have offered a fractional HR solution probably for about 3 or 4 years now, where we can be brought on, we've always done in the context of it being a smaller organization, not needing full-time HR support or help. can bring on just the right hours that they need to support their organization, right? So let's say you have 15 people on your team, right? You might not need more than 25 to 30 hours of HR support a month. And then you can bring us on to get that instead of making a full-time hire. So that has always made sense to me. But as I dig deeper, I'm finding that there's more and more ways to do it. There's more and more areas than I previously thought of that you could get fractional help in. There's, and there's not even just limitations around the idea that it has to be so many hours, like a month, like a monthly fractional engagement. There's other ways to do it as well. And so I know you've seen a lot of that stuff out there. I thought it'd be good to kind of talk through some of the areas that we've seen, fractional be used successfully and areas that people could get that help in. So Mike, I wanted to put the question to you. I know you have operated in a fractional way in the revenue space, but what are some of the areas that you've seen, people operate fractionally?
Well, I think one of the most common fractional roles that's out there is a fractional CFO. They've been out there forever, for a long period of time. And a lot of people have used that word. And I mean, unfortunately, one of the dangerous things that's happening right now or so many people are talking about being fractional or going fractional or doing fractional things. And unfortunately, it creates a lot of confusion in the marketplace around what fractional is. And I didn't really call myself a fractional revenue leader until probably 4, maybe 5 years ago. And that's 9 years into the business. But that's what Mike and I did when we started the business because in order to operate with the multiple clients that we worked with, we had to be fractional in each of those. It was whatever the denominator is for your fraction. It could be I can work with three clients at a given time, so my fraction is 1/3. Yeah, I can work with 5 clients at a given time. My fraction might be 1/5. I have a need that's out there from a customer perspective where they only need 1/10 of me. It might be 1/10. That's the cool thing about fractions is there are multiple denominators that you can apply. And the way that I like to think of the role is I like to think of it as more like a mercenary role. And you're hired to do a specific thing, whatever that thing is. I do not like to do it or use time as a function of the ability to do that thing, because me getting involved in doing something like process documentation or building out systems or building out go-to-market stuff or working with revenue teams or whatever the thing is, I can do that a lot faster than a lot of other people because of my experience, my expertise, and my awareness of the marketplace. So why would I charge you by the hour for that work? I can't charge by the hour. So I like to use a charge by the project or charge by the job to be done or charge by the capability that we're adding in there, which makes me a little bit unique and different. And some people would say, well, that's purely consulting. And it might be. I think when we get hung up on these terms, we get ourselves into a situation where we make those things a little bit less approachable than they should be.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think?
Okay. No, I agree with you. And I think too, that even goes back, Mike, to how we originally had said, hey, look, the concept of fractional actually is not new. It's just the term has kind of taken off, right? In the last, 4 or 5 years, right? I would say that 4 or 5 year trajectory where you started using that term is similar to what I have seen out there as far as people saying, this is what we do, this is what we offer, and that term fractional coming up. So actually, it's interesting that you made that pivot at the same time that it seems like a lot of people were beginning to use that term. What caused you on your end to start using the term fractional you said, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah. I think it was a combination of it being more of an accepted thing and a known thing. So it becomes, once you identify a word and you can apply a word to a certain situation, you have common vocabulary, then it becomes easier, simpler to communicate. And when you have a common vocabulary, you can align on that. And then you can start to identify what you're going to do next and start executing on those things. It's a simple word that it relates well to the thing that's being done, the job to be done in that context. So what caused me to do it? I just started to see it being used more inside the market. And since it was being used more inside the market, it started to make more sense and more people were starting to look for it. I was like, okay, well, let's go into it. Let's lean into it rather than create a new word just for the sake of creating a new word. So that probably was
Yeah.
the catalyst for me on that side. It isn't that the job really changed though over the last 9 years. I mean, the business has evolved a bit over the last 9 years around how we do it and how I do it. There was a time where we'd build that inside our organization. When Mike and I started the company, started Catalyst, we were planning on building inside our organization and then trading or moving, shifting that group of people back into another organization, kind of like an incubator of sales teams. And we never were able to figure out how to make the financial side work on that, nor were we able to accurately address the risk on both sides, the risk both on the employee side, the owner of the company side, and on our side. So after Mike left the business, I started to shift things and take the approach of building inside organizations rather than building inside our organization and then trading people over. So that's been the evolution on my side. How about on your side?
Well, it's a little different and a little bit more direct, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, but not necessarily in a good way or a bad way. It follows what most people would associate with the word fractional. But let me back that up, as you talked about embedding and stuff like that. So when you do it, have you been directly embedding yourself in the organization to build up the capacity within the organization? That's kind of like your goal, like your mentor who's there, so that way you can exit and then out.
Yeah, I'm not employable.
Yeah.
And I get that. And part of the reason I'm not employable is I won't, as we become more friendly, and you've seen this with me, as we become more friendly, I become super direct. Like I just don't have time for the bullshit. Like let's agree to whatever it is that we're working on accomplishing. Know that we both deeply care about each other. We care about each other's business. We care about what's happening. We care about the people around us. We care about our customers. So if we are all aligned on that, then let's do the necessary things to move things forward quickly. And one of the challenges I continue to see out in the marketplace is we suck at moving forward inside organizations because of either a lack of design or a lack of communication. Those are two of the really big ones. And that's part of that leadership wheel that I've put out there. But there's a lack of design, there's a lack of communication. If we can find words like fractional to help communicate something more clearly, then let's use those kind of things. When it comes to working with organizations, it really depends on what the specific need is. And that's the cool part about being an executive who has an ability to work with multiple organizations is I can adapt and adjust my approach inside each organization to accomplish the specific job to be done at that point in time to help them break through whatever it is that they're struggling with or whatever they're stuck on, so that they can start taking that next logical step, start creating movement, which turns into momentum. And my goal is to fire myself out of a job as quickly as possible. And the reason I want to fire myself out of a job as quickly as possible is because I don't want the organization that I'm working with to be solely dependent on me, because I'm not employable. I'm not going to be there forever. Like I want to leave them, use the Boy Scout mentality, leave your campsite in a better place than it was when you got there. Right. So that's how I think about that kind of stuff. So sometimes it's inside an organization as a fractional leader. Sometimes it's working with leadership inside the organization as maybe a fractional coach or fractional trainer or fractional guide or fractional facilitator. But never is it full time. Yet on the other side, on their side, many of the people who I work with will look at it and say, will think of me as a full-time employee inside their organization because of the access they have throughout the process of working with them. But that's how I manage my business, which is a little bit different than how others who are in similar spaces might manage their business. I don't do things by the hour. It doesn't work for me. Because my brain is always going, even when I'm out on the golf. So if I'm out on the golf course or I'm watching a hockey game or I'm sitting at a swim meet or doing whatever, my brain is always going and I'm trying to connect dots between what I see there and how it might apply in different areas. That includes learning from customers and starting to think about how I can apply what I've learned in that customer to other customers, which is the benefit, one of the key benefits an organization being able to work with an operator like me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, hey, look, I can relate too to like, so in a contrast in styles, we have done stuff hourly, but there's a little bit of a different kind of goal here, right? So, um, and all that to say, because I'll get into how we do it, but all that to say before I do, I'm like you. I might do stuff hourly, but I'm not turning off, right? If I can't turn off sometimes. I think about what we're trying to solve. And I mean, that's what we're paid for, right? Is to help solve people's problems. But
So here's
go ahead.
here's the thing, and I think this is a good, really good conversation to have as we go through it, because you're gonna, as a leader who's listening to this conversation between Tim and I, you're thinking, hey, might fractional work for me? Why might I use it? Where might it apply? How might it work? What kind of fractional do I want to have in there? And I can't answer those questions, and Tim can't answer those questions. We can ask the questions that will help reveal it so that you find the right fit, which is why I think there's a really interesting thing that's happening in this space around recruiting and starting to recruit fractionals who can move into a place really quickly. So you're not dealing with the longer, call it a sales cycle or longer interview cycle that might happen when you're bringing somebody in. So there's a number of different ways to do it. The challenge is when folks start to manufacture fit into a place and start to, because I need money, because I've got to pay for house or food. And now I start working with a customer in the way that they want to work rather than what I know works in that right area. And then there's an inefficiency. So in that instance though, where you're being paid by the hour and you're thinking about somebody else's business in an hour that you're not contracted for or not being paid for directly, I would say that somebody is losing in that situation. And it might be you, or it might be them, or it might be the other people that you're around. But somebody is losing in that situation, which a lot of people might disagree with in that mentality or that idea. And I mean, could you imagine if I was to ding a client for every 15 minutes, I'm thinking about their stuff like some attorneys might do, or some other roles. Like there's a reason why attorneys and salespeople have a bad reputation out in the marketplace. And that's one of them. It's like, hey, every time I pick up the phone, it's just going to cost me a lot of money. Well, what if you actually work with someone like you work with a number of people on retainer, where you've already paid for the access for that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you're right. And I mean, I think so. And where we do charge hourly, it's a little bit, and there's a reason for it. But I mean, we wouldn't. I mean, there's limits, right, to when I would turn on the clock, so to speak. But like for us, it's just slightly different, right? Because like you're going in your model, you're going in and you are you're setting people up to exist without you, right? We're brought in because, and so there's probably already existing people in place. There's budget for it. It makes sense. It's a business case, and you're calibrating them more or less to be able to just do even better. We're going in because we have a business that doesn't have need for an FTE or a full-time employee in that space, right? So we're going in there to operate that system and operate those processes for them. And so with us, what we would do is you would get an operator, right, on our team to do that. And then you would get my senior level insight as well. But like we're going in there to basically create an HR or people management system, get it all set up, implemented, and then operate it like a good, HR department would do. But it just goes to show you kind of like what we're getting at. There's different ways that fractional can work. There are different ways that it can come into being. It could be, and there's a place where it makes sense for both. It makes sense for us to do hours based, even though you're right. I do not always turn off personally, because we have people on our team that are working normal, 9 to 5, 8 to 4 hours, that are coming in to operate the process for you for X number of hours per day. Makes sense, right? For your mission, what you're doing makes sense because you're there with defined outcomes that aren't necessarily related to directly operating something. Is to set it up to be operated and then get out. You're like the Mike Keenan, right? You're in there to win a cup and then get out. So
it is, and it's really cool to go through the conversation, right? Because there's fit for different things. Like there's a There's a tool that can be applied to create leverage and ultimately create movement. And whether that tool happens to be, hey, I'm going to pay by the hour, like going and getting your car worked on, or going and having outsourcing a certain function of people, or even knowing that people are going to be available in that specific time period. Or excuse me, and there's also a fit for other things. I think one of the biggest challenges that's out there, and I'd be really interested in your perspective on this. I know we've got to move here pretty quickly, but when it comes to scoping, actually, you know what? Let's foreshadow. Why don't we record the next time we record? Let's talk about what goes in. What are some of the questions we should be asking as leaders inside an organization when you start to figure out appropriate scope, appropriate jobs to be done, needs that exist inside the organization, to start to figure out whether or not fractional might be the right fit. And then on the other side, it might be interesting to get into a discussion around why executives might want to move or make themselves available from a fractional perspective, and some of the things that you benefit from by doing that. Tim, where can people go out to find more about what you're working on?
Well, I think there's two things we should mention where people can find out more. There's going to be a link in the show notes to some of the ways that Mike and I work together to help you sort out fractional for your organization, and definitely take a look at that link. From our perspective in our business, our recruiting HR consulting firm can be found at bestculturesolutions.ca. But definitely check out, whether or not fractional would fit for you. In the show notes below, there's a nice quiz to ask you questions about your organization and where you're looking to get results and quick results. And I encourage everybody to take a look at that link and take that quiz, because it'll help make sense for you as to whether or not fractional might be something that would benefit you and your organization and what your goals and needs are.
Yeah, and what Tim's referring to, and we'll include links in the show notes. If you go to findmycatalyst.com/fractional, you can take a fractional readiness assessment, or you can book time with Tim and me. I think it's Tim and I. So you can book time with us, and we can go through, and we can either tell jokes, share hockey stories about frustration of either team or our actual teams that we follow, or get into the specific things you're thinking about inside your business. And I can tell you this, if you're working on a leadership challenge, which is how you move forward, fractional may help you. It may not be the right solution, but it may help you. If you're working on an operation challenge, which I think of culture, how we do what we do, it may help you. It may not be the right fit. If you're working on a revenue challenge, it may help you. It may not be the right fit. If you're working on an execution challenge, it may help you. It may not be the right fit. But I can tell you this, if you are working on any challenge and you're struggling, you do not need to struggle, because there are operators out there who can help you do this. If you know somebody who would value this or get value out of this, share it with them. Sales is the thinking process. Business is the thinking process. Life is the thinking process. Are you thinking different about yours?